Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. BC's drug decriminalization experiment begins.
It's a step in a positive direction, but it's a half measure.
Why some aren't convinced it'll make a big difference. Plus, the Canucks lose their captain in a blockbuster deal.
He shoots, he scores!
It's tough, but it's a move that probably needed to happen.
What it says about where the team is headed, and a high schooler's free blockbuster library in the Fraser Valley.
Well, it's sort of like going to an actual Blockbuster store, but it's on the curbside.
Sharing his love for the nostalgia with others.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. We begin tonight with a massive move for the struggling Vancouver Canucks. The team bidding adieu to team captain Bo Horvat. He's now heading to the New York Islanders. Our Jen Burrett is live with us tonight for more on this. And Dan, a trade involving Horvat had been rumored for some time.
Indeed, and this is a massive change, Anita. After 9 years with the squad, Captain Bo Horvat is heading across the continent in exchange for 2 forwards and a protected first-round draft pick. Horvat was picked by the Canucks in the 2013 draft and named captain in 2019, scoring 201 goals in his time here. This season, he tied his career high with 31 goals and was set to represent the Canucks at the upcoming All-Star weekend. But he is the first in what will likely be many changes to this team as it lurches through a tough season. His trade comes just days after the team fired head coach Bruce Boudreau. Canuck brass say they're sad to see Bo go, but claim they put their best offer in months ago, and he wanted to wait.
We certainly wanted to keep him here, but when we made our offer and were understanding that that might not be the case, my job is to check around in the league and talk to teams and see if they have any interest in the player.
So, Dan, how does this actually help the team moving forward?
Depends on who you ask, Anita. Gurp Sien with Hockey Night in Canada Punjabi says he doesn't expect another captain to be named for the rest of the season, though names are being bandied about already. He argues Horvat's departure is the right move.
Along the way, I think some of the younger players on this team who have already become the leaders, Elias Pettersson is one of them, even a guy like Quinn Hughes, you're going to see some of these younger players step into that leadership role over the years.
And it will not be long before Horvat faces his now old teammates. The Islanders host the Canucks next Thursday, Anita.
Dan Burrett live for us tonight. Thank you, Dan. To the day's other top story now. As of midnight, adults across the province will be allowed to carry small amounts of illicit drugs. The move to decriminalize comes 6 years after BC declared illicit drug deaths as a public health emergency. But as Susanna De Silva explains, some wonder if the new limits will actually be effective.
Many here didn't know today was the day.
I heard about it. I wasn't sure when it was coming into effect.
Living on the streets for 3 years, Sarah McDonald calls the move a start, especially since police will stop seizing small amounts.
Definitely prevent a lot of crime, because when it gets taken, then people have to do more things, whatever, to get it. So, and the more desperate people are, the more risky and stupid things they're going to do.
We will work closely to...
Ottawa says it granted BC's request to decriminalize in the hopes of reducing overdoses. On average, more than 6 people die every day in BC.
We will be able to reduce the stigma, the fear and shame that keep people who use drugs silent about their use or using alone, and help more people access life-saving supports and treatment.
BC asked for a limit of 4.5 grams. Ottawa decided it would be 2.5 of cocaine, meth, MDMA, and opioids, generally about the size of a quarter. Police officers have received training on the new rules, though generally haven't been arresting people for small amounts of drugs since 2020, but they still seized them.
This model that we're moving towards is destigmatizing that drug use so they don't fear, a police officer's interaction, but hopefully we can direct a person to help and support.
Although police chiefs support the move, they worry about the possible increase in public consumption, while others say the way to prevent deaths is to prescribe a safe supply.
It's a step in a positive direction, but it's a half measure. And we need urgent, comprehensive intervention that addresses the fact that the drug supply at this moment is toxic and killing people.
I think it's definitely going in the right
While
direction.
McDonald worries about a lack of treatment options.
I knew someone who was waiting for a few months to get into it, and then they missed the day, and then they had to go back on the wait list, and then it's like so upsetting.
All levels of government say they will be increasing support and treatment for those looking for help, and say they recognize that support needs to be available the moment someone is looking for it. They also say there may be things that come up that they will need to adjust to, but those who advocate for users say they are still worried that the threshold and limit is too low, and also about youth who are not part of this pilot program. Susanna Da Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
As Susanna indicated, there are a lot of unanswered questions over whether BC has enough resources to handle the new decriminalization policy. Meteorologist Baines has more on how government agencies will try to measure its impact and how some families are reacting.
Reducing stigma around drug use is a key measure of success. Vancouver sports writer Jason Botchford, a father of 3, died after overdosing on cocaine and fentanyl in 2019.
His secret became my secret, which became this harboring shame that I carried for a year. I was so fearful that people would judge him and tear down his legacy.
His wife says she didn't know about his drug use and finally told their 2 oldest children about what happened.
They were actually more mad that I kept the truth from them than how he died. We all have a responsibility to change the narrative on substance use.
But while the province hopes new rules decriminalizing small amounts of illicit drugs will reduce stigma, critics are questioning whether there's enough help available when people ask for it.
The main concern from the opposition is that this government is not as prepared as they should be to provide recovery supports and services to people who do reach out for help.
BC's coroner will reveal the latest number of illicit drug toxicity deaths tomorrow.
Tragically, illicit drug toxicity deaths have occurred in our province at more than double the national average.
While police agencies have implemented training, there are questions over how the federal and provincial governments will keep track of the policy's success with the ultimate goal to save lives. There will be numbers made available to the public.
It will be that there will be a formal preparation of a quarterly dashboard that will be shared with Canadians.
It's still not clear what that will look like. The federal government has said the province was granted the exemption for less than 2.5 grams because of the data it's gathered so far from public health and public safety agencies. Experts in the field of mental health and addictions hope this new policy will be the way forward. Meteorologist Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Today was the 6th day of the inquest into the death of a VPD officer who died by suicide in 2019. Chen filed a complaint against 2 VPD officers alleging sexual assault and extortion prior to her death. Sergeant Corey Beck, a longtime mentor of Constable Nicole Chan, told the inquest today that he spoke with her the night before she died. Beck said that Chen was afraid of not being able to work again after Human Resources staff showed up to a hospital while she was apprehended under the Mental Health Act. The inquest also heard about Chen's fears that co-workers in the department were talking about her and spreading rumors. Tomorrow is the final day of the inquest. Well, the Komagata-Maru Memorial in Cole Harbour has been defaced for the 3rd time in less than a year. The memorial commemorates the nearly 400 immigrants from India aboard the Komagata-Maru that were turned away from Canada in 1914, even though they were British subjects. After months docked, they were forced to turn back to India, where many of them were gunned down. The Canadian government has since acknowledged that it was a racist act.
I think oftentimes when we hear of these vandalism, it's just like, okay, here we go again. It's clear that this memorial site, which is, bestowed with such meaning, with such history in terms of histories of empire and race in this country and province, continues to be targeted. And this time it was specifically, naming and shaming South Asian stereotypes and stigmas.
Vancouver police are investigating the incident and say the city says that while it's unclear what the motivation was, it shows disrespect to those commemorated and their families. Well, today work has started at Boundary Bay in Delta to protect the tidal marsh there. Crews have been removing log debris that floated away from industrial sites and ended up in the delicate ecosystem. We caught up with the project lead about the importance of restoring the marsh.
So a number of tidal marshes throughout the Fraser Delta have been covered in woody debris that's the result of human activities. You might be able to see in the background, we're leaving the large wood and the large natural wood with those root wads, we're leaving those in place so that they can provide perching locations for native wildlife and whatnot. We're also removing any large garbage and debris that we find. And there's also some logs that have been covered in creosote that were used for various industries along the banks of the Fraser. And we're removing that creosoted logs and disposing of it in a safe manner. Tidal marshes in Boundary Bay help to protect our communities from coastal flooding. And tidal marshes also provide benefits directly to humans. So these ecosystems take carbon from the atmosphere and store it into the sediment. We would love to work with the logging industry to talk with them about improving best management practices for storing these logs in the log storage areas throughout the Fraser River so that these logs are not escaping and accumulating in these tidal marshes. And we would also love to work with industry. We think this is a fantastic opportunity for industry to be part of the solution by helping out possibly to remove some of these accumulations of woody debris and restore more tidal marshes in the Fraser estuary.
Moving on now, the Vancouver School Board is voting tonight to change the name of a downtown elementary school. Lord Roberts Elementary was named more than 100 years ago for a famed British soldier, but his legacy has faced increased scrutiny in recent years. Municipal Affairs reporter Justin McElroy is live with us now. Justin, what are the complaints behind the name and how likely is it that it'll actually change?
The complaints, Anita, go down simply to the fact that while as a leading British general in the Boer War, Lord Roberts oversaw concentration camps. Now, this has always been part of his legacy, but as time has gone on and as people have started to examine the names of schools and why people are being honored, there has been energy picked up to change the name. Now, the Vancouver School Board has a process in place for changing the names of schools. It requires a multi-year process where everyone has to be on board, from the Parent Advisory Council to the local community. They have to have discussions. They have to prove why there's ample energy and support for the name change. This passed by the committee stage of the school board earlier this month, so it should pass tonight. One of the parents involved behind the push says it's a long time coming.
Lord Roberts hasn't made sense for, I guess, as long as people have been against naming schools after people who ran concentration camps. I'm confident we can come up with better names to help people find schools or better recognize the place that we live.
Justin, this is part of a trend that we've seen in recent years with school names. So why are we actually hearing about this so much in Vancouver specifically?
Well, it has a lot to do with when Vancouver's population really exploded in the 1890s, 1900s, 1910s. And during that time, it was a relatively young country. And when they were looking for names for schools in the city of Vancouver, it meant that they often went towards people of British heritage that were famous Britons. Here's a chart looking at the city of Vancouver, all of the different school names in the city, and you can see more schools are named for people of British heritage or symbols than people who were actually from British Columbia. So we've already seen in the last couple of years, Matthew Begbie Elementary School has been changed their name to one of Indigenous meaning. We'll see what happens with Lord Roberts. The community has said that if they want a school name changed, they prefer it to be not for a person, but for something community or geographically based, but just part of rising change that's happening with how we consider what school should be named for.
Justin McElroy reporting live tonight. Thank you. Well, Victoria Police have a new tool for dealing with mental health calls. They are partnering with Island Health to create a new mental health team. A police officer will be paired with a clinician to deal with calls about issues like psychosis and suicide attempts. The service will be available 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. A similar service was announced in Nanaimo last week. I'm sure you've noticed it. A cold spell is sweeping across most of British Columbia, with temperatures in some parts of the province expected to drop to below -10 overnight. The cold blast is concerning advocates for people experiencing homelessness, especially after a series of snowstorms last month that significantly impacted people on the south coast. Cities including Vancouver, Burnaby, and Squamish are opening emergency warming centers to cope with the frigid weather. And in Kelowna, the city there is deploying insulated shelters to help people living on the streets. There are 20 of these insulated foam shelters, big enough for one person to lie down in. The shelters are being used in Kelowna's designated camping area along the Okanagan Rail Trail.
This is by no means a solution of any sorts to address any housing needs or any sheltering needs. This is really just an immediate interim measure to provide some relief to our community during times of extreme weather.
The city has also provided about half a dozen two-person insulated shelters. As it says, all its homeless shelters are full. An estimated 100 people are sleeping outside on the streets there in any given night. Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now. Joe, these temperatures are downright dangerous, I imagine, across the province.
Yeah, absolutely, Anita. Last night was sort of the coldest of that air mass, but I want to show you just how cold our afternoon highs were today right across the province. It was sort of the heart of the Arctic air mass yesterday, and today afternoon highs did not get above the freezing mark and through Abbotsford, and you had quite that outflow through most of the weekend as well. Not getting much above 2 degrees in Metro Vancouver, 3 for Victoria Airport, but check out the interior. These are your afternoon highs, so Kelowna -6, waking up to wind chills, though, of -15 in through the Okanagan, feeling that -5 out towards Nelson today all day. Now, the Arctic air mass is getting pushed out thanks to the arrival of a Pacific system that will bring milder air, but that clash means some good snow for parts of the province. Prince George, Caribou under a winter storm warning for up to 40 centimeters by Wednesday afternoon, more like 20 to 30 centimeters once we get up to the Peace. This is much needed snow, but coming all at once, we will watch for avalanche risk. And the bottom end of that same system may bring a few flurries to us overnight tonight. Not all the models in agreement, but I'm pausing you tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Look at all that purple, Anita. I think our best shot is a couple centimeters before changing over to showers. It's not a lot, but you might want to leave a little extra time tomorrow with any snow in the forecast here in Vancouver.
No kidding. Good advice. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Well, the number of people moving from BC to Alberta has reached a 20-year high due to lack of affordability, according to the latest data from Stats Canada.
The market is not going to create like really cheap, low, affordable homes that are affordable to people with low incomes. That has to be nonprofit homes. That has to be government housing, social housing.
While highly sought after, these housing projects are not matching demand, causing the mass departure. Almost 55,000 people left the province in 2021. With the deaths of 5 people already in BC's backcountry this year, the debate is being renewed about how many essential items you need minimum for survival. For years, advocates have recommended 10, but a study out of the U.S. is now saying you only actually need 4 essential items. As Yasmin Gandam tells us, experts say this is misinformation.
North Shore Search and Rescue say the difference between being prepared and not having the right equipment is life and death.
A probe, a transceiver. This is gonna produce a signal, so you're gonna wear this. So if you get caught in an avalanche, it's gonna allow people to locate where you are, and then you're gonna need a shovel.
The essential gear you need also depends on the season, with winter bringing an increase in avalanche risk. Having the right clothing is a non-negotiable.
But this can make the difference between you having hypothermia and not having hypothermia. So this little puffy here is a great thing to have. Obviously, having a Gore-Tex jacket is very important, especially in this climate.
He also recommends having a headlamp and a satellite device.
You're not relying on this for anything else other than calling for help.
Danks and other search and rescue crews in BC are worried this message is getting lost, as a study from the U.S. circulates online. It argues hikers only need 4 essentials: water, food, extra clothing, and a medical kit, that the rest is unnecessary.
I find it disappointing because it's essential that you bring at least the minimum equipment.
But BC Search and Rescue says it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it.
It's like asking someone who came back from a car ride, did you need your seatbelt in the airbag? No, I didn't need it. But if you ask someone who was in an accident if they needed that seatbelt or that airbag, they would have a different story.
BC Search and Rescue has been collecting data for years to keep people safe. There are more than 1,700 rescues a year, and many because hikers were unprepared.
50% aren't injured, and of that, 25% didn't have a navigational aid. 10% got trapped by darkness. They didn't have the right gear. They didn't have flashlights.
Advocates don't want anyone to leave behind essential items, and when you take your cell phone,
Please make sure that you have a backup battery for your phone.
Yasmin Gandam, CBC News, Vancouver.
A group of British Columbians are being recognized by the province for exemplary service to their communities. This year's Medal of Good Citizenship recipients include 3 young community workers. Saurabh Sandhu has more on their contributions.
From collecting toys for sick kids to fighting climate change, these young award recipients have done it all.
They have given of themselves in extraordinary ways in service to their communities.
I'm so honored to be here with such an amazing group of people.
University student Rashika Silva Kumar has been volunteering as a mental health advocate since she was in grade 9.
I saw a lot of my peers struggling with their own mental health, so I wanted to do my part and see if I could help them and create a space where we can talk openly about these things.
She was among a group of 7 people from Metro Vancouver being honored for their dedication to service at a ceremony at the Vancouver Art Gallery Sunday. In total, 15 British Columbians are being recognized, including 4 from Vancouver Island and 4 from the interior. 20-year-old Landon Brown has spent the pandemic collecting toys for sick kids who are receiving treatment in hospital.
Some of them can't afford a tablet or a phone to keep in touch, so we wanted to be able to give them that opportunity to contact their family and their friends.
Rachel Dong is a changemaker in her community, championing other young people to reduce their environmental footprint and food waste.
I potentially want to go into education, so I feel like educating and learning about these concepts are a very important first step towards taking action.
The young volunteers say they are honored to be recognized for their work, but say this is just the beginning. They are encouraging others to step up and volunteer also.
It's sometimes hard to start your own initiative or become involved, but once you find that community who supports you, you can really go from there. And don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone.
Anyone can make a difference and just help your community.
Rashika says no matter how you choose to make a difference, do what makes you feel happy. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Vancouver.
Decrim, it's a step in the right direction, but it's also really flawed.
After the break, a deeper dive on the province's move to decriminalize small amounts of illicit drugs, what some local doctors and drug users think about the plan, and whether it will keep people from dying. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream tonight. The University of Manitoba is home to one of the largest insect collections in Canada, with the oldest specimen dating back 128 years. With close to 3 million bugs, the collection at the Wallace Ruffley Museum of Entomology could hold the key to understanding how climate change will impact tiny invertebrates.
And this is the wow tray.
Jason Gibbs is the curator of the J.B. Wallace R.E. Ruffley Museum of Entomology at the University of Manitoba. He says what started out as a small collection rapidly grew into a multi-million swarm.
This is a collection that was formed about 100 years ago by the first entomologist who worked, started the department. And at first it was quite small, but over the decades it increased and got larger and larger. And now we're at somewhere about 2.5 to 3 million specimens, but we don't have an exact number.
The oldest specimen dates back to the late 1800s, and they've all been carefully pinned, tagged, and preserved. And Gibbs says more than a century later, they're still adding new species to the collection.
When I started here 6 years ago, the number of wild bee species known from the province, from decades and decades of people doing research on bees was 236. It's now 392. I remember the first time I found one that was actually an undescribed species that no one had ever identified it at all. It didn't have a name. And I think I did a little dance. I mean, I kind of jumped out of my chair and was just like, this is amazing.
Gibbs gets requests from across Canada and the world to study the specimens in the collection. And now, as the climate crisis is heating up, Gibbs says these insects could hold some important answers.
We don't have time machines that we can go back and look at how these things have changed over time, but we have this collection, and so we can go back and see what were people collecting in 1913, what were they collecting in 1916, 1960, up until the 2000s.
Research shows insect numbers are declining due to climate change and pesticide use in Canada, but scientists believe there's a bigger threat to these tiny invertebrates.
Habitat loss, and that one might be the biggest and most important issue of all. And we have a lot of important work to do in Canada to think about halting and reversing nature loss in our most heavily used areas.
Jeremy Kerr specializes in macroecology and conservation at the University of Ottawa. He says collections like these are key to understanding how some insects might respond as the earth warms.
They provide us with historical insights that are not available using any other technique. There are no shortcuts to be had there.
Back on the Manitoba campus, Gibbs says one way people can help insects is by planting native prairie plants, but also to pay attention to see which bugs are buzzing around.
Returning now with a deeper look on today's top story. 6 years after overdose deaths were declared a public health emergency here in BC, the problem has only gotten worse. The province hopes that starting tomorrow, decriminalizing small amounts of certain illicit drugs might help. The CBC's Nick Purdon spoke to people here in Vancouver about whether the plan will stop drug users from dying.
This is the area where my brother died. He was smoking crack. He smoked it and then just was found like an hour later.
Collie Sedgemore's brother died from contaminated drugs. And ever since, Collie has been working to stop the overdose crisis. This is how personal the fight is for you.
Yeah, well, it's not just my brother, it's also other people that I've lost too. It's the amount of loss that we're dealing with in this crisis. And it just seems to be getting worse.
Collie works in this overdose prevention van, where they give out clean supplies and keep an eye on people as they use drugs.
We save lives. People are able to smoke safely, and we can watch them and make sure that if they overdose, we can reverse it.
Collie tells me there's another reason the work they do here in the van matters.
Yeah, well, as a drug user myself, it's kind of just like showing people that people can be functional addicts. It's really important to me.
Collie has been using drugs for more than 10 years. That's why I want to know what he thinks about decriminalization.
It's a step in the right direction, but it's also really flawed because they think it's going to help overdoses. It's going to help curb the overdoses when it's not. All this does is just limit from people getting arrested for using drugs and stuff. People are still going to be dying from toxic drug supply.
Most drug overdoses happen because street drugs are contaminated with things like fentanyl. And so users don't know exactly what they're taking or how strong it is. Why do you think the government's doing this?
It's just another way for the government to pat themselves in the back and say they did something when it's not.
What Collie wants the government to focus on is getting rid of the poison street drugs that are killing people. I'm going to be speaking with the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions. Is there a question you want to ask her?
I'll ask her how she'd feel if it was her kid. If it was her own child that was dying, died from an overdose and stuff like that. How would she feel? What would she do to fight this?
With Collie's question, I go see BC's Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, Jennifer Whiteside.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm
Jennifer
Nick.
Whiteside. Hi, Nick.
Nice to meet you.
How are you?
I spoke to one user in Vancouver who lost a brother. I said I was going to speak with you. And he said, would you ask the minister if she would fight harder if this was personal, if this if one of these deaths happened in her family?
Well, I would say that that I think this is a personal issue for very many British Columbians, and our government understands that. And the work that we're doing is very much about responding to the proposition that I start from, which is that every single life is valued.
7 people a day are dying in British Columbia of overdose. How will your decriminalization plan help stop that or help that?
So it's intended to ensure that we're not treating individuals who are using drugs, who are using small amounts, who are carrying small amounts for personal use, to ensure that they don't wind up on a criminal justice track, that they have the opportunity to use the drug that they've procured for their personal use, which is what they need to help get them through their day.
Do you think come February 1st, when you can have decriminalized 2.5 grams of heroin or cocaine, do you think that'll save lives?
I mean, I think we'll see. I think obviously we're gonna see the impact in terms of the interaction between what happens between law enforcement and individuals on the ground, and I think we'll see what happens.
But you're not going to say yes or no, because you want to see the data.
I am going to wait to see. I am going to wait to see what the data tells us.
The minister is hopeful that the new policy will work. But what about the people most affected by it? I'm at a meeting of the Vancouver Network of Drug Users. This is a group of users that defend the rights of people who use drugs.
Well, we've been fighting for decriminalization of drug users for as long as we've been an organization, for 25 years.
This group actually had a seat at the table as the BC government developed this decriminalization plan. They didn't want a limit of 2.5 grams because they say most users consume more than that in a day.
2.5 does decriminalize some of us. Not most of us, not enough of us, but we got our foot in the door. What do you do when you get your foot in the door? We all, because there's so many of us, we're an organization of 3,000 people, we all put our hands on that door and we pull the MFer open more.
I see the frustration here. They want change, now. You know, what's it like to live in a time where 7 people in British Columbia every day are dying of drug overdoses?
We've seen our community leave the planet. Half of it's gone, probably more than that. This building is surrounded by ghosts. All of our lives, we're all haunted by the ghosts of people who are gone. Just in December, around Christmas, Ricky, Flora, Miles, people we all know and have worked for years, gone. Never see them again. Will decriminalization stop that? No.
I think that it's not only about decrim, it's about getting a safe supply. You know, because, I mean, they could say you can carry 1,000 pounds, but if it's bad dope, we're still dead.
Does it mean anything that on February 1st, you can go outside, you have 2.5 grams of heroin or whatever the drug is in your hand and you're not a criminal? Like practically or psychologically, does that do anything?
We got to stop the stigma of that all drug users are criminals. Like, oh, you use drugs, we don't want to talk to you, right? You know what I mean? That's got to stop. Okay, because there's real people who use drugs every single day and function every single day, you know what I mean? And you don't know it.
Yeah. For Colley, there are also practical concerns with the new law, that some people won't understand it.
Just so people understand that it's only 2.5 grams that people can have, or less than 2.5 grams. And it's just a way to show people in an easy, simple layout that people can read and hold on to.
Colley hopes the cards will help people understand what they can and can't do, so that they won't be considered criminals anymore. Here, even a family medicine clinic doubles as an overdose prevention site.
I've intervened in more than 100 overdoses, right on the doorsteps of our clinic. We had to get 2 oxygen tanks at our clinic for when there's 2 overdoses at the same time.
Dr. Christy Sutherland tells me things have been getting worse. Does she think decriminalization will make a difference? What do you think about the government's decriminalization plan?
Well, I am very excited about it, because to me, it's like a change in the tide. It means that we can envision a better future where people who use drugs are not criminalized and punished for what they do with their own body, and that we can envision a future where organized crime doesn't have this billion-dollar, tax-free, regulation-free playground to sell to. I hope that we end up with a legal regulated market for all drugs.
But if that's to happen, Dr. Sutherland believes What we need is a more open discussion about drugs.
All drugs carry risk. Alcohol causes dementia and cancer. Cocaine can cause strokes and kidney failure. But it's not the risk that makes things legal or illegal, because what causes the most death? Tobacco and alcohol. What causes the most sick days and economic loss? Tobacco and alcohol. That they are the most harmful drugs because they directly cause cancer. Opioids don't directly cause cancer. They cause low testosterone and bone mineral density loss. So if we were to pick the thing to be illegal versus legal based on drug profile safety, we'd pick opiates to be legal and we'd make tobacco and alcohol illegal.
For Dr. Sutherland, if we're not honest about how drugs really affect us, how can we make decisions about them? As I walk down the street, I'm reminded that every time Collie and any other user buys drugs, there's danger. You can't know for sure what's in them. When you look to the future, what do you see?
It's hard to hope for the future when we don't really know what's going to happen tomorrow. I could end up, for myself, I could end up dying tomorrow. It's quite heartbreaking, but it's also, it keeps me motivated to keep fighting. I see that no one else is coming for us. No one else is going to help us. It's like we need to help each other.
Nick Purdon, CBC News, Vancouver.
I'm just sort of desperate to get my bag back.
It's a problem plaguing airports all across Canada. Piles of lost luggage. We'll show you one passenger's frustrating fight to have her bag flown home. Stay with us.
It's opening night for the David Milne exhibit at the Vancouver Art Gallery. A lot of food, finery, and fuss, just to celebrate the work of a relatively unknown Canadian painter. There's even books, posters, and T-shirts bearing Milne's name. David Milne himself would have felt uncomfortable being showered with such praise, especially in such lavish surroundings. David Milne Jr. believes his father painted not for fame or fortune, but purely for the creative kick.
I think he'd be pleased that as I am pleased and honored that other people are interested and like the work. But for the artist, for the creator, once the picture was created, once it was done, then it was on to the next one.
Milne made his mark early as the only Canadian to be represented in the now famous Armory show in New York City back in 1913. Milne's colorful New York paintings were shown alongside Matisse, Gauguin, and Picasso. During the later days of World War I, Milne was an artist for the Canadian Army, chronicling his impressions of the destruction of war. But Milne's greatest artistic contribution came when he retreated into the wilds of Ontario, where he redefined the Canadian landscape.
I think my father is thought of as the hermit artist, or the genius in hiding, or the undiscovered artist, the unknown artist, the artist who received no recognition during his lifetime and has emerged as a major figure, has been discovered. Here he was living in great isolation in a tar paper shack on a rocky point on 6 Mile Lake with no one else living on the lake. But at the same time, he was writing almost weekly to Alice and Vincent Massey in London, they were then the High Commissioner in London, the height of the London Society, and concerned with all the great world events of the late 30s and the rise of Hitler and so on. So he was not isolated from thoughts.
Ian, why should the average art goer care about David Milne?
Well, I think that one expects an artist to change the way one looks at the world. And I think that is something that Milne very much changes the way that we see things. He causes us to sort of consider very simple objects differently. He causes us to look at the landscape differently. And he also causes us, I hope, to look at color and shape and light in a completely different fashion.
Showing us the world in a different fashion was motivation enough for David Milne. Making a lot of money didn't seem to matter. But with this show, the artist's work is being seen by many more people, many for the first time. And Milne would be pleased enough with that.
becoming a familiar scene that just isn't going away. The growing piles of lost luggage in Canada's airports seem to have no end in sight. Sophia Harris is looking at the missing baggage woes and what's being done about it.
I feel extremely angry.
Deborah Cleary was exasperated after waiting more than a month for her suitcase. It disappeared when flying from Italy back to Montreal on Air Canada. 2 weeks ago, Cleary returned to the Montreal airport to search again.
There were just bags that were piling up and piling up.
But hers was still nowhere to be found.
I'm just sort of desperate to get my bag back.
Baggage problems first emerged in the summer. The airlines blamed staffing shortages. Then in December, the cause was massive winter storms disrupting flights.
Delays equal missing bags.
This former Air Canada executive says Ottawa needs to provide more funding to help keep airport operations running smoothly.
There's obviously a need for better infrastructure, better resources for airports to make them more resilient to these weather events.
There's also the problem of locating missing bags.
We zoomed in on Google Maps, and it is a public storage facility.
Nikita Reese was able to track the whereabouts of her husband's missing suitcase thanks to an AirTag tracker inside the bag. Even so, Air Canada declared the luggage lost.
The most frustrating thing about it was we had no way of getting it. Even though we knew the location and we told the airline so many times. My bag!
She finally got the bag back last week, more than 4 months after it had disappeared during a flight home from Greece.
Minister Alghabra.
The transport minister says airlines need to step up their game.
It's frustrating that airlines still have not modernized their luggage handling system.
Air Canada says its baggage operations have returned to normal and that Reese got $2,300 compensation. Following a CBC News inquiry to Air Canada, Cleary also got her suitcase back.
It's just been a series of frustrations.
Ottawa says it's beefing up its air passenger rights regulations, which may include new rules for missing baggage. Sophia Harris, CBC News, Vancouver.
Healthcare, safety, and the economy topped the agenda today as MPs resumed sitting in Ottawa after a 6-week break. As David Cochrane reports, this comes a week before the Prime Minister meets with premiers.
As winter blankets Ottawa, MPs return to Parliament, and the leader of the NDP tries to flex some political muscle.
The for-profit privatization, the American-style healthcare system that Doug Ford and Downing Smith are proposing, it's only going to make things worse.
Singh pushed for an emergency parliamentary debate on for-profit private health care, a week ahead of the Prime Minister hosting the premiers for a healthcare summit, with some provinces keen to embrace more private care.
I'm not surprised the Conservatives support this approach. They believe in for-profit private healthcare. But I am surprised with the Prime Minister. Why the flip-flop?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I and the Liberal government have always been very, very clear. We stand for a public health system that fully abides by the Canada Health Act.
While the New Democrats focused on health care, the Conservatives look to blame the Liberals for a long and growing list of problems.
We have 32% increase in crime. We have the TTC transit system in downtown Toronto overtaken by crime.
From a surge in violent crime to the rising cost of living.
When will this Prime Minister and Canada's worst money manager in Canadian history stop breaking Canada, rein in his spending, and making the price of everything go up?
Mr. Speaker, we know that many Canadians are facing real challenges, and that's why our government is there to help.
It's a new sitting of Parliament that's picking up where the old one left off, with the ongoing crisis in healthcare and the struggles of ordinary Canadians to make ends meet dominating the agenda. David Cochrane, CBC News, Ottawa.
To international news now. A bomb exploded today at a mosque in northern Pakistan, killing more than 60 people. The blast happened during afternoon prayers, and as Salima Shivji explains, most of the victims were police officers.
A stunned silence as the grief sets in for the dozens of injured. Victim after victim rushed to hospital in Peshawar, in Pakistan's northwest. As the search for survivors became more frantic. Nearly 60 worshippers dead, with the toll expected to rise. The suspected suicide attack was timed to hit a packed Shia mosque. shattering the tranquility of afternoon prayers, ripping through a wall and bringing down parts of the roof. We were preparing for prayer, this man says. We were on the stairs when the blast hit inside. He and others rushed to rescue the wounded, leaving many behind, already dead, trapped under the rubble. We took out 7 injured worshippers, this social worker says, but 2 died on the way to the hospital. Most of the victims were officers, hundreds working inside a highly secure compound that was somehow compromised. Within hours, Pakistan's prime minister met with survivors of the blast, calling the scale of the tragedy unimaginable. An attack on Pakistan, Shehbaz Sharif called it. Terrorism is our foremost national security challenge, he wrote on Twitter. An increasingly unwieldy challenge. Peshawar, tucked near the border with Afghanistan, has seen its share of militant attacks, and even more so recently. There's been a surge after a ceasefire between the Pakistani Taliban and government forces crumbled. A security situation that's rapidly deteriorating, leaving those in mourning also searching for answers as they bury their dead. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Mumbai.
He was one of the best to ever hit the ice. Hockey Hall of Famer Bobby Hull has died, and he leaves behind a large and sometimes controversial legacy. We'll tell you more next.
We're sharing really important information with the public, and I feel like this is exactly what our job is, especially as the public broadcaster, especially in morning radio. That's incredibly important.
Land Back is a CBC original podcast where we uncover land theft in Canada and look at how Indigenous people are taking it all back.
And that's what empowered nations and empowered people to just literally steal land.
This is a consequence of your actions.
And it's time to give land back.
Land Back is out now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe is back with us. And Johanna, before we get into that cold air that's expected to leave, I think everybody would like an update because you were supposed to take Wesley, your little guy, snowboarding this weekend.
Anita, we did it. We took him up Saturday morning to the top of Grouse for his first snowboarding lessons. And let me tell you, there were laughter, there were hopes of Olympics, there were tears. But overall, it was a
couple of face plants.
Oh yeah, a couple of I think, and also it was like a 3-hour lesson for a first time. It was a lot, and I mean the snowboard was like this big. It was so cute.
That's adorable.
Yeah, he was figuring out heel and toe side already after the first lesson. He just looked so cool out there. I was very proud. But Anita, I was definitely, my husband and I were like the parents hiding behind the shed so that we wouldn't distract him, but like filming.
Yeah.
I get ready.
You got to get that on camera for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, I think he's pumped for more lessons. So stay tuned. The next snowboarder, maybe in the Olympics, coming soon. No pressure, Wesley. Yeah. It was nice. You know, I got to say the snow was a bit icy, but it was beautiful to have those blue skies up there at the top of the mountain for everyone else who got out this weekend. Wanted to show you the big picture across the country because we're seeing that Arctic air mass really in through central Canada. It's pushing east, as I'll show you in a minute. Check out these temperatures across the U.S. eastern seaboard, where they're in a snow drought right now. New York City, this is the latest in the season that they've ever not had accumulating snow. And I just got to show you these afternoon highs through the week. Watch temperatures in places like Oshawa, just outside of Toronto, Quebec City. These are going to be some of the coldest temperatures our friends in Eastern Canada have experienced in about 20 to 30 years. So some record-breaking cold just for a day and a half as that same air mass zooms eastward. Okay, our story for tomorrow really will be the slight chance of snow here in Vancouver and the big chance of big snow for central BC. Wanted to take you through the snowfall forecast across the province, and you can see some bullseyes around the Caribou region and then also towards central coastal sections where we could see over that 40-centimeter mark. It's all thanks to this specific system that's bringing that milder air in, but as it brings that moisture, that collision zone is bringing that risk for a few flurries overnight. Again, some models just bringing a few flurries, others saying a couple centimeters for Metro Vancouver. So just be prepared. You might wake up. It'll happen just in time for the morning commute if we do get it. Temperatures are warming up this week, though. By Wednesday, everyone will be sort of on the plus side of the freezing mark, and we'll be back to rain and seasonal temperatures. And look at this. It's almost like the snow will be but a distant memory by the time we hit next weekend. We'll look for some steadier rounds of rain ramping up just in time for the weekend as we get close to double digits. Anita, I was looking at the rainfall totals through to next week, and it's about 100 millimeters to give you an idea of what's coming next.
Looks about right.
Yep.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
To other hockey-related news tonight, legendary player Bobby Hull has died. Hull, who played professional hockey from 1957 to 1980, helped the Chicago Blackhawks win the Stanley Cup in 1961. He was also named the NHL's most valuable player twice and won the league scoring title 3 times. Hull was one of the most prolific goal scorers in NHL history. His slap shot was so powerful, it was once clocked at 193 kilometers per hour. When Hull joined the Winnipeg Jets of the rival Hockey World Association in 1972, he became the first player ever to sign a contract worth $1 million. He was a fan favorite, but he was also a controversial figure. He faced many allegations of domestic abuse and racism over the years. In 1986, he was convicted of assaulting a police officer who intervened in a dispute between Hull and his wife at the time. Hull was in the Hockey Hall of Fame. He was 84 years old.
They don't have to, but they could get a membership card.
It's a modern twist on a nostalgic favorite, the Langley high schooler who's brought his take on blockbuster video to the neighborhood. We'll tell you about it next.
Oh yeah, look at these near beers.
Oh, there's a few here.
All the colors of the rainbow.
The near beer rainbow.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Aaron Gotts. I play music. I do a bunch of different things around town. I also love to drink non-alcoholic beer. I've drank 242 kinds and love to share some of my knowledge.
I assume you don't drink?
I don't drink, although, you know, I'm hearing a lot more people saying that they're starting to mix them in, especially with some of the new guidelines and people being more conscious. But yeah, personally, I haven't had a drink in 10 years, and for the first 7 years, non-alcoholic beer wasn't that good. And then sometime just before the pandemic started, I started hearing some things and started getting some things showing up on the shelves and through the mail, and yeah, the game has changed. They've cracked the code. They've figured out how to make these things taste good. Okay, well, I brought you a whole wide array of things going right from a light wheat ale all the way through to a stout. Trying to give some of the variety of taste.
What are we going to crack first then?
Well, let's start here with, this is a wheat ale from Calgary. It's fairly light. And as the style goes, you know, it's not a really hoppy thing. It's kind of more some subtle, well, you'll notice some crackery notes as I pour this in. And some sort of, see, it's very pale. Bit of a very fluffy head. Okay, we're gonna try a Czech Pilsner from Vancouver. Again, this one is very much on the traditional European style Pilsner. So, I mean, you hear Pilsner, you think like a macro beer, but this one is much more like a craft European. You'll notice it's a lot more hoppy. There's some grain, there's some very floral notes. But it's also very gentle and very kind of, there's a delicateness to it. Put it in the mouth, on the palate, it is crisp.
It's really nice, Aaron, to have an afternoon beer and get that same satisfaction you have from drinking a normal beer, but have these near beers and not get drunk and have that satisfaction. What does that mean for you?
Well, it is. I mean, I can have a morning that I remember, you know, and certainly no one ever out there, you know what you don't miss, and what I've never missed is a hangover. We're gonna try a fruit beer.
Okay, fruit beer. Where's the fruit beer from?
This is a sour. This is from Quebec.
Okay.
And Quebec has an unbelievable scene right now. It's hard to get stuff outside of the province, but there are literally over 100 non-alcoholic beers alone produced in the province of Quebec. This is a good one.
Okay. I'm excited. I don't think I've ever had a sour beer, even when I was drinking. So.
Well, we're gonna change that.
Okay. Smelling it. Oh yeah, you can smell a little bit of the fruit on it.
It's dry and yeah, it's got a nice raspberry kick to it.
Okay, well, let's do it. Oh yeah, that's
a lot of raspberry, but it's got that sour kick. It's not intensely sour, but it makes it cut through.
Well, thank you for introducing me to my first sour beer.
Okay, well, wonderful. I'm glad to have been able to make that introduction.
History. History.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On March 2nd, join CBC Vancouver's Michelle Elliott and a panel of top UBC experts at the UBC Med Talks, a hybrid event on the topic of healthy aging. Register at alumni.ubc.ca and never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox and keep connected with us.
Well, you've probably seen those little free lending libraries around various neighborhoods. Well, now there's a free Blockbuster lending out movies in Langley. It's run by a grade 12 student at Walnut Grove Secondary, Matt Reed. He fondly remembers going as a child to the Blockbuster in Walnut Grove, and so he jumped at the chance to do something similar. The little cabinet is full right now, really full, and he still has lots of DVDs and VHSs inside the house. It's free for people to take, leave, and return.
They don't have to, but they could get a membership card from a little cabinet. like this. It's a membership card I'm holding.
You can find the location of Matt's free Blockbuster at the website freeblockbuster.com. According to his map, he is the only one in British Columbia. You know, I have a box full of VHSs and DVDs collecting dust, so maybe a donation is in order, though I will not give up my Little Mermaid video. Not sure what I'll do with it, but some things, you just can't get rid of, right? Thanks for watching CBC Vancouver News tonight. We hope you have a great evening.